You can bring the witness in, officer. Thank you. All right, be seated, ladies and gentlemen. We'll proceed with the direct examination. Go ahead, Mr. Schellhorn.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, just to finish up on the point of the... I'm sorry. I heard my own voice there, Judge, and I think it's okay now.
Are we good, Ms. Radler? Yes. All right, very good. Please proceed, Mr. Schellhorn.
Doctor, just one final question on the Rorschach. You indicated that you had reviewed Dr. Hasson's rescoring with the Exner. What was your impression of that rescore?
Well, again, the test is it's invalid without a doubt, but there's some interesting points here that seem to have been left out. For example, if you look at page 12 of 13, number 21, says here, this is from I'm reading it now. This person, meaning Michael, appears to be excessively committed to seeing the world accurately. He is consequently capable of perceiving people and events realistically, but he is also likely to be highly precise impressions he forms of situations. Only rarely will he allow himself the risk of forming an impression that may be inexact. And then it goes down to number 24, which I thought was important. Generally speaking, he displays an adaptive capacity to think logically and coherently. He is capable, as most people, of coming to reasonable conclusions about relationships between events and maintaining a connected flow of associations which ideas follow each other in a comprehensible manner. I think that's important because that's the opposite of a psychosis. His thinking is clear and logical based on this. I don't know why that was left out. And then it goes on to the next page, page 13 of 13. Going down the third paragraph, it would start situation-related stress, because he's consequently more vulnerable than most people, becoming acutely upset, anxious, even disorganized, and his situationally determined stress overload is also likely to impair his capacity for self-control and create a potential for impulsiveness in what he thinks and says or does. And then 2 paragraphs down, he displays an adaptive capacity to think logically and coherently. And the last sentence says, there's a connected flow of associations in which ideas follow each other in a comprehensive manner. This is all the opposite of a psychosis. Why isn't that in a report? Why wouldn't you put that in? Come on. So I thought that was noteworthy, and that's why I'm bringing it up.
And doctor, is that the RIAP?
No, that's the Rorschach Interpretation Assistance Program. It's the Exner, what he got from the Exner.
Judge, just so the record's clear, that's marked as S435.
All right, I was going to ask you that question. S435, okay.
Doctor, moving on to the MMPI, could you generally explain what that test is and what you're looking for?
Sure. The MMPI, it's the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. That test has been around since the 1940s from the University of Minnesota. That's why it's called Minnesota. Personality inventory, and multiphasic just means many different parts. The test has been around for years, and it has been restandardized in the early 90s by a guy named James Butcher. And James Butcher is from the University of Minnesota. So he's very knowledgeable on this test. He's really the person who did the restandardization. I've used the MMPI for years, and what I use is I use the 10 basic clinical scales, 1 through 10, and 10 validity scales. Now, here's how the test is set up. Before you interpret the profile, the test tells you how the subject was taking the test. Were they being overly defensive and denying problems that everybody has, such as never had a headache, never had a bad day. True. Well, that will elevate that validity profile. Are they over-endorsing items to make them appear more disturbed than they actually are? They have every symptom. Bugs crawling up my skin, hear voices, Martians control my brain, things like that. An over-endorsement of items. Or are they trying to respond to items in a socially appropriate fashion, showing high moral values and what's socially expected? For example, before I vote in an election, I thoroughly investigate the candidate's position on all of the issues. True. Well, very few people do that, but it's socially appropriate. So before you interpret the 10 clinical scales, you look to see how the person was going about taking the test. And then you look at the 10 clinical scales. Very important. Lecture number 1 in the MMPI, if you're teaching this, is the labels of the 10 clinical scales should never be taken literally. It was never meant to be that. So, for example, if a person has a high elevation on scale 4, the label is psychopathic deviant. That does not mean the person is a psychopath. It doesn't mean that. Scale 8 is labeled schizophrenia. If a person has a high elevation on scale 8, it doesn't mean the person is schizophrenic. It never meant that. Scale 6, for example, is labeled paranoia. If you have a high elevation on scale 6, that does not mean the person is paranoid. As a matter of fact, most, not all, but most flagrantly paranoid individuals don't score high on that at all. And if you look at Butcher's book, I showed the prosecutor, I don't know if any of that came out, but anyway, he has a section that says the literal do not literally interpret these scale names. And the first sentence is, if you do, you're poorly trained. That's not me, that's Butcher saying that. So if you think a high elevation on scale 6 means you're paranoid, it means one thing according to Butcher, you're poorly trained. You don't understand what's going on. And if you read the description from Butcher on an elevation on scale 6, it's nothing about delusions and all the rest of it. So when I hear, for example, in Dr. Hasson's report, and I do not want to be disrespectful at all, and I'm trying my best not to be, and I don't want to be. But he said something to the effect, I don't know anybody that would look at this high scale 6 and interpret it anything different than paranoid psychosis. Really? I don't know anybody that would, including Butcher, who wrote the book on it. So it's just incorrect.
Now, when you gave this test to Michael Barisone, what were the results that you came up with?
Well, I gave the test, the validity, on page 53, if anybody's following this, the validity scales show a non-significant exaggeration of symptoms, so that's not a problem. There was a slight attempt to give socially approved answers concerning self-control and moral values, but it didn't invalidate the test. Sometimes the validity scales are high and it invalidates it. That is not the case here. I found mild depression, anxiety, suicide threats and attempts are possible, inner anger, irritability, suspiciousness. These are common symptoms, and individuals likely control their anger, but sometimes they episodically explode and surprise those around them. Now, how am I getting that? It's not just scale 6, but he had another scale elevation, without getting into the weeds, high scale 4, low scale 5. That's sometimes called a masculine protest, meaning individuals feel insecure and try to compensate for that by demonstrating that they're dominant in some way. Also, with the MMPI, what you do not do, or let me put it a better way, what you do is you have to look at what's called critical items. Critical items are what items is he responding to that's elevating the scale. This is common sense, and you really have to do it. Now, I'm looking at, this is Dr. Hasson's findings, and if you look at critical items, let me show you, these are the items that elevated the scale that that Michael responded to. Also, I should say this before I even get into this. It is not at all uncommon for criminal defendants pending a serious trial to have a high elevation on scale 6 because a lot of it is reality-based. People are persecuting them and out to get him and talking about him. So here's the items that Michael responded to.
Doctor, just before you judge this, I believe has been marked as S434 for identification.
All right, and what is that exactly? Those are scale scores?
No, this is, Judge, this is the MMPI 2 extended score report.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is your understanding that Dr. Hassonm had rescored your scores or used your scores and rescored it on his own?
Oh, yes, but that's not the point I'm making now.
I just wanted to make the record clear.
Yeah, oh, okay,
Before you
right,
go on.
right.
Go ahead.
Okay. So if you look at the critical items, now I did this, and he did it too. How do I know? It's right here. I am sure I get a raw deal from life. True. Someone has it in for me. True. I believe I'm being plotted against. True. I believe I'm being followed. True. I feel I've often been punished without cause. True. It is safer to trust nobody. True. Given Michael's situation now and the circumstances you're in, this is all reality-based. This is not a delusion or a psychosis. This is what he's experiencing right now. There's a couple of other ones. Someone has it in for me. True. I believe I'm being plotted against. True. I believe I'm being followed. True. I believe I'm being talked about. True. I have no enemies who really wish to harm me. False. People say insulting and vulgar things about me. True. Every one of these is reality-based. And so when you get an MMPI, you have to use your common sense. You don't throw your common sense out and not look at what he responded to. That's what you have to do. And when you do it, you see all of those are reality-based. There is no basis at all to conclude that the results of the MMPI shows paranoid psychosis. It does not. It absolutely does not.
Doctor, you didn't render a diagnosis based on your administering the MMPI or the results you got from that test?
Of course not. You never, no diagnosis from a psychological test, none.
Before I ask you about the other two tests that you gave, Doctor, did you also review Dr. Hasson's results on the PAI?
Yes. Now, the PAI, it's called the Personality Assessment Inventory. This is a good test. Now, I mentioned the Exeter bad test, bad scoring system, Rorschach good test, but system is bad. The MCMI, the Milan Clinical Multi-Axle Inventory, he also gave, which is a terrible test, shouldn't use. But this is a good test, the Personality Assessment Inventory. I don't know of any research article that said otherwise. It's like the MMPI, basically, a little shorter, and it's very good. Now, when you look at this test, I think it's 17 pages long. I'm not 100% sure.
Judge, for the record, the doctor's referring to what's been marked as S436 for identification.
All right, thank you.
Now, you look at this, and again, this on the cover sheet here says what all of these say. And I'm going to just read the beginning of it. It says, interpreted information contained in this report should be viewed only as one source of hypotheses about the individual being evaluated. Do you see that same in all of these tests? These are hypotheses, suggestions. You don't make a diagnosis based on a test. But anyway, when you look at this test, I open up the first page, and what do I see on the top in bold capital letters? Warning, validity scales indicate hypotheses may not be valid. It doesn't say, consider this, take a look at this, by the way, bullet point. No, warning. And so this is on the top of the page. Every page, every single page of the 17 pages has it in bold print, in capital letters on the top, warning. And then you go to the actual validity scales, because there's a whole validity of the test results. Now, you don't use any other validity measures other than this validity measure. This is the validity measure used by the test itself. So when you look at this, and I'm on page 9,
And doctor, just to remind the jury, when you say the validity of the results, what does that mean?
it means the validity of the results that they found in this test. Warning, it may not be accurate.
So this is the test that was given to Michael Barisone, and the test results indicate the validity is questionable.
More than questionable. No, when you put warning on something, to me, that's more than questionable. They didn't say results are questionable, take another look. No, they said warning. And then they get into it on page 9, the last paragraph. The degree to which response styles may have affected or distorted the report of symptomatology on the inventory is also assessed. It means they're doing this. Certain of these indicators fall outside the normal range, suggesting that the respondent may not have answered in a completely forthright manner. The nature of his responses might lead the evaluator to form a somewhat inaccurate impression of the client based upon the style of responding below. And then it goes on the next page, and again, this is in capital letters. The test results potentially involve considerable distortion and are unlikely to be an accurate reflection of the respondent's objective clinical status. The following interpretation is provided only as an indication of the respondent's description. And then it goes on.
Doctor, in that same paragraph, is there anything in that paragraph about malingering?
Well, yes. Right above that it says, with respect to negative impression management. Impression management is a word means people try to manage their impression to other people. Patients do it, defendants do it all the time. Negative impression management is you want to appear more disturbed than you actually are. Positive impression management is you want to appear less disturbed than you actually are. So here it says, with respect to negative impression management, appearing more disturbed, there are indications suggesting that the client tended to portray himself in an especially negative or pathological manner. Some deliberate distortion of the clinical picture may be present. The critical items should be reviewed to evaluate the possibility of malingering. And then it goes on. The important point is, where is that in his report? I read his report and he said the validity indicators are great and here we go. That's not true. I mean, come on now. Again, I don't want to be disrespectful, and it's a little uncomfortable doing it because someone told me he's actually in the courtroom. So I feel a little uncomfortable doing it, but anyway, you know.
Doctor, let me ask you, you just used the term malingering there.
Yeah.
Can you tell the jury what that term means and where it comes from?
Faking an illness. It's as simple as that. A little boy doesn't want to go to school because he didn't study for his arithmetic test, tells his mother he has a stomach ache. A person with a mental disorder wants to feign mental symptoms for obvious legal reasons.
And without jumping ahead too far, did you find evidence in this case of malingering in the defendant's case?
I didn't find any evidence of malingering. Dr. Hassonm did, but didn't report it as such.
Let me ask the question a little more pointedly. Did you find any evidence of malingered amnesia?
Oh, malingered amnesia, yes. Yeah, not malingering. Yeah, yes, I found malingered amnesia, absolutely. But not malingering a mental disorder.
And can you explain the difference between what you just answered and what I had asked?
Well, malingering generally means to malinger an illness, to malinger a disorder. Malingered amnesia is different. That's when you claim you don't remember what had been done. Malingered amnesia, I mean, I can go into it a lot of detail, but yeah, simply.
It can mean different things in different situations.
Malingered amnesia means only one thing. It means you're feigning loss of memory. That's what it means.
Doctor, I want to direct your attention at this point to the last two tests that you gave to Michael Barisone. Mm-hmm. Can you tell the jury what the TAT is?
The TAT is the Thematic Appreception test. This is an old test from the 1930s. It shows pictures of all sorts of people in ambiguous situations. And your job is to create a story. And in the process of the story, hopefully you'll reveal yourself and more information about you will emerge. Just give me a second.
Doctor, there is is some water.
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
Water.
Yeah,
Sure,
thanks,
there's
Judge,
water
yeah.
there. It should be fresh too if you need it.
No, I'm fine. I give the TAT. TAT is not scored. This is a projective test. And you interpret it at the level of face validity. Face validity means, on the face of it, can you understand what's going on within the person? So, for example, if a patient says, there's a person leaning over a couch, crying, thinking of suicide, her life is terrible, this is the end. You got a good idea of what's coming from the person's mind. You don't need a score for that, a scoring system at all. So I gave Michael that test, and he gave themes involving depression, despair, loss of hope, inner conflict, suicide, interpersonal loss, and significant inner turmoil. There was really nothing particularly outstanding. There's no question Michael's depressed. There's no dispute, in my opinion, anyhow, of that.
Did you also give him a projective test?
Well, that was a projective test. I gave him another one called the projective figure drawings. This is a very simple test. You just ask people to draw a picture of a house, a tree, a person of the opposite sex, and the worst thing you could think of. Usually you get nothing, not much. Like in this case, you really don't get much of anything.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, nothing really significant, for example. So you ask a person to draw a picture of a house because a house is very important to people. That's where you live. If you ever drove past a home that you grew up in, and your parents sold it, and new people lived there, you get a funny feeling because your ego boundaries extend beyond you to your house. So it's important. Tree, person, opposite sex, and the worst thing you think of. Usually you get not much, but sometimes you do. And I gave the, I don't know if it...
What would be an example of a significant drawing?
Well, I gave you some drawings that I've included in a chapter that I wrote, and I have a lot of these in my book, of dismembered people, exposed genitals, violence, and this sort of thing. Those are significant. Now, I didn't have that here. You interpret it at a level of face validity. And most competent people do that. Now, in Dr. Hasson's report, he referred to a number of people, which I thought was quite interesting because a number of the people they referred to as experts, I not only know these people, I've worked with them. About 4 of them wrote forwards to my book. And he referred to one of my books. He referred to Reed Malloy, who is a very prominent person. And he wrote a forward to one of my books, wrote a chapter in another book, and I wrote a chapter in one of his. But I gave you an article, I don't know if this came out, where he shows a picture, a figure drawing that's very illustrative, which he put in an article that he published. So, to say that this isn't done is just incorrect.
Now, Doctor, I want to ask you about your particular diagnoses or conclusions in this case. Mm-hmm. And you had already mentioned early on the DSM.
Right.
You mentioned that there are different editions over the course of time. Can you just explain to the jury, in your own words, what the significance of the DSM is to your field?
Well, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders is really the manual that lays out the diagnostic criteria for all of the diagnoses. And they go through different revisions. The DSM-5, I think it was 2013, is the latest revision, but there'll be another one in a couple of years. Why? Because research comes in, you understand things more, it's developing, it's evolving, and so it changes. And it's been around, DSM-1 was published in 1952. And this is the way you make a diagnosis. You use the criteria delineated in the DSM. Now, when I make a diagnosis in a forensic case, I do it with the manual open. Because who can memorize this? Nobody can memorize this manual. How are you going to know? And so I do it with the manual open. And I remember distinctly, I said to Michael, because sometimes people wonder, what are you bringing this big book out for? I said, I don't want to make a mistake. And I simply just go on through all of the criteria and evaluated him with all the criteria, all the diagnoses that were raised in this case.
You indicated that the DSM-5 is the 5th edition over the course of time. What's your understanding of how, or the process that goes into a new edition coming out?
Over the course of, let's say, 10, 15 years, research is published, and the DSM folks will put together a committee on each different diagnosis. They'll brainstorm as to what the research tells us, and then they'll make modifications to try to keep everything up to date and, you know, best practices and so on.
Now, you said that when you conducted your examination of Michael Barisone, you were aware of Dr. Simmering's diagnoses?
Yes.
Did you consider a number of diagnoses in addition to what Dr. Simmering found?
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Because other diagnoses were raised in the case, and I wanted to do a thorough job and make sure I considered everything.
What does the term psychosis mean?
Psychosis simply means a break with reality, and it's manifested by symptoms such as hallucinations and delusions. Hallucinations are perceptual. Auditory hallucination, you hear voices. Visual hallucinations, you see things that aren't there, usually of religious content. Olfactory hallucinations, you smell horrible smells, rotting flesh. Gustatory hallucinations, horrible tastes in your mouth, metal. Tactile hallucinations, bugs crawling under my skin. Those are hallucinations. Delusions are false beliefs not based in reality. So, for example, if you think 2 and 2 is 6, that's not a delusion, you're incorrect. But if you think 2 and 2 is 6 because Martians changed the number system, that's a delusion because there's a break with reality. That's a bizarre delusion. Now, there's some non-bizarre delusions that can actually occur in daily life. The difference being Martians is not an occurrence in daily life, but other things are, and you could develop a delusion. So I'll give you an example to illustrate a non-bizarre delusion. I know of a case of a middle-aged guy, worked at a large company. He was a manager of like a unit, and the company was going through some sort of inspection or review, and he slowly developed an idea that the administration of the company the company was going to fail this review or inspection. They were going to blame him for it. They're all plotting now to blame him. He'll lose his job. He'll never get another job, and his life will be completely destroyed. And when he said things similar to that to his coworkers, they said to him, "No, what are you talking about? Everything is fine. The company's not going to be fail. No one's trying to get rid of you." And his response was, "You don't understand. You just don't understand." That's very typical in a delusion. The people in your circle around you try to dissuade you of this delusional belief.
In that example you just gave, was there any initial trigger for him having that delusion?
It was insidious. It was insidious as to why that happened. But all of that went on for an extended period of time, a couple of months. He became more and more delusional with respect to this conspiracy. And what finally happened is he's walking down the hall, and the head, I guess the president or the head administrator, said to him, "Good morning, doctor. Good morning, doctor. Good morning, Mr. Bailey." And that was it. Because he told his friends, "He always called me Bob, and today he called me Mr. Bailey." See? You see the sign? That's a delusion. That's a delusion. That's a non-bizarre delusion because, I mean, people get fired from their jobs. But this was a break with reality. So that's essentially what a delusion is, a fixed false belief not based in reality.
Now, before we get to some of your diagnoses, doctor, you indicated that you were aware of Dr. Simmering's diagnoses?
Yes.
And you're aware that he diagnosed the defendant with delusional disorder, persecutory type, and depression disorder?
Yes.
With respect to depression disorder, would that affect a person's ability to know right from wrong?
Generally, no.
Would that affect a person's ability to know and appreciate the nature and quality of their acts?
No, generally no. But I should say I disagreed with Dr. Simmering with respect to his diagnosis of depression.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, Dr. Simmering diagnosed Michael as having a persistent depressive disorder. That's essentially a chronic low-grade depression, like a characterological depression, like a person who's like dyspeptic, a downer. I disagreed. I think he had recurrent major depressive episodes, and I based it on a number of factors, including I read the text messages from years ago with Ann Picardo, his long-term therapist, and it's way more than persistent depression. So I disagree with Dr. Simmering with respect to depression. I think he had a more significant area of depression intermittently or recurrently.
Now, with respect to the diagnosis of delusional disorder, are you aware of the delusion that Dr. Simmering identified?
I'm not exactly sure of the delusion Dr. Simmering identified. I mean, he said it a couple different ways. It's not 100% clear. All these Facebook postings that Lauren put on the internet, Dr. Simmering asked him essentially, what do you think of those? And he said they were harassing and annoying. And Dr. Simmering in his report said, I disagree with him. They were coded messages where he thought Lauren was going to kill him. Or so, I think that's what he said. But there was no, from what I read his report, there was no real clear delineation of what exactly this delusion was. But anyway, but there's no basis for that at all.
Well, did you find any evidence of delusions based on your examination of Michael Barisone?
No, I found no evidence of this at all. And here's what's important with respect to a delusion. This may have got lost in the translation here. A delusion is not a fear. If you're frightened, if you're terrified, that is not a delusion. That's an emotional state. A delusion is a false belief not based in reality, and those in your circle try to dissuade you of it, like I mentioned with the guy with the company. In this particular case, the people in his circle, whether it was Mary Haskins or Ruth Cox, they agreed with him about Lauren's dangerousness. If you listen to Mary Haskins' interview with the police, you don't have to go beyond 5 minutes. She sits down, she tells what her name is and where she's from, and the first thing she said is, we're terrified for our lives. Is Mary Haskins delusional too? And at the end of Mary Haskins' statement to the police, you have to listen to the very end because it's about an hour where nothing, she's just sitting there in a room. At the very end, she said, I don't know where I'm going to stay tonight. I can't stay at the farm because Lauren's father is going to come and kill me. Is that a delusion? I mean, she's now delusional? Look what Ruth Cox said. Ruth Cox said multiple times, Lauren is dangerous. Lauren's going to not give up until she gets what she wants. Lauren is going to, said to Michael, Lauren's going to set you up for sexual assault because she knows it's not defensible. Get her out of here. She's dangerous. Now, Ruth Cox is also dangerous? You mean everybody's delusional there? Nobody's delusional there. Are they frightened? Yes, but that is not a delusion. That's not a break with reality.
Now, did you ask Michael Barisone about the pressure that he was feeling with respect to Mr. Goodwin and Ms. Canarak being at the property?
Yes, I mean there was a long-standing conflict there. There was an interpersonal conflict between Michael and Lauren right from the beginning when they were in Florida. Keep in mind, they met in Florida. Lauren came from North Carolina. They met in Florida. There was interpersonal problems in Florida. They went to New Jersey, more interpersonal problems. They went back to Florida, more interpersonal problems. At this point, if you're so delusional that a person's going to kill you, why do you let him back to New Jersey? They're down in, that's a perfect break time. You're down in Florida. We're done. We're not doing any more training. Take your horses, put them in North Carolina, but our training is over. You graduated or something like that. Why let him back? He told me why he let him back. He said he needed the money. He said, I was under financial pressure. He had a divorce going on. He said, you have difficult clients. Everybody has difficult clients. You have to learn to deal with it, and so on. So he let him back. So he wasn't that frightened of her. He wasn't that terrified of her if he let her back.
Did you ask him about the social media posts?
Yes.
And did you review a number of those posts yourself?
I reviewed all of the social media posts.
How did he characterize the posts when you interviewed him?
Well, he told Dr. Simmering they're annoying and harassing, and that Dr. Simmering thought they were coded messages. he thought that the manifesto was killing the king was him and Mary Haskins was the queen, and there was this conflict between them. And Lauren's very, I mean, I never met Lauren, I don't know anything about Lauren, but just read these posts. She's obviously very bright and very creative. And so she's writing all these things out in symbolism, and that's how he interpreted it. I can see how he interpreted that. That's nothing distorted about it. I see how he interpreted that. I think it's very reasonable interpretation.
Now, moving ahead to closer in time to the date of the shooting, did you ask Michael Barisone about when he first obtained Ruth Cox's gun?
Yes, but I have to refer to my report somewhere because I'm not.
It's on page 47, Doctor.
Oh, okay, hold on for a second. Yes. Yes, I asked him.
And what did he tell you about Ruth Cox's gun?
Well, Ruth said in her statement that Michael asked to see her gun several days before the shooting. And I asked him about that. He said, I didn't ask to see her gun. And he explained that Ruth Cox came there on August 2nd, and Michael knew she traveled with the gun, and he felt it wasn't safe in the car with Lauren there. And so Ruth gave me the gun, and it went in the safe. That's what he told me.
What's the significance, if that answer is accurate, what's the significance of that answer?
Well, the significance is he had the gun, and that's the gun that was used in the shooting.
Does it show anything with respect to the nature and quality of his actions?
Does it show with nature and quality of actions with respect to what?
Does it show anything with respect to whether he appreciates or knows the nature and quality of his actions?
Well, he certainly knows the nature and quality of his acts, what a gun is, put it in the safe, of course, absolutely. And also, the gun was in a case and the ammunition was not loaded. Dr. Ruth said that, and Michael said that.
Did you ask him about when the town came to the property? I believe that's on page 48 of your report, Doctor.
Yes. I asked him about the fire safety complaint. Is that what you're referring to? Yes. I asked him about that. And he said, we had a house, our home was under construction, minor issues, and Goodwin turned it in.
Is there anything delusional about anything with respect to that?
No, not at all.
Why not?
Just isn't. It's all reality based. Goodwin did turn it in. The guy came. They condemned part of the residents. And that was it. It all actually happened. This is not in his mind. This happened.
Now, are there different types of delusional disorder according to the DSM?
Yes.
Can a person with delusions know the difference between right and wrong?
Depends on the case.
Can a person with delusions know the nature and quality of their actions?
Usually, yes.
Now, moving on, Doctor, and in the event I hadn't asked you this, just so I make sure I don't forget, are any diagnoses that you rendered within a reasonable degree of psychological certainty?
All of them that I rendered are within that.
Now, you already told us about your diagnosis for depression.
Yes.
Did you render a diagnosis related to personality disorder?
Yes. Could you give me a page number, Counsel?
Page 64.
64. Yes, I did.
What is personality disorder?
Personality disorder is everybody has a personality, and a personality disorder is when the traits are characteristic in one way. It's simple as that. I looked at him. I believe he has a personality disorder, and I found that the two traits that are most characteristic of him are obsessive-compulsive traits with a preoccupation for detail, order, organization, and control, devotion to work, inflexibility with respect to morality and ethics, and reluctance to delegate to others. I got this right. This is from the manual. I'm not just making that up. I went right through the criteria in the DSM, and he meets the criteria for that. Obsessive-compulsive personality. Again, it's not bad. It's just characterizing the way he is. A lot of successful people have obsessive-compulsive traits. And I also found deep feelings of inadequacy. I mean, if you look at this case in its entirety, inadequacy and low self-esteem always emerges. It comes out. It was certainly in Ann Picardo's text messages and notes. He said, and even in a text to Mary Haskins, he said, "I know I'm repulsive to you as a man." And when I questioned him directly, he showed feelings of inadequacy as well. So I think the traits that best characterize Michael are obsessive-compulsive traits and inadequate traits.
With respect to the personality disorder diagnosis, would that have affected his ability to know right from wrong on the day of the shooting?
No, not at all.
Would it have affected his ability to know or appreciate the nature and quality of his actions?
No, not at all.
The last questions I'm going to ask you about, Doctor, you had referenced earlier malingered amnesia.
Yes.
And I know you talk about this in your report on pages 66 and 67.
Right.
Can you remind us what malingered amnesia is?
Okay, well, malingering is simply faking an illness. Now, the DSM is very important because what they say is, and I'll refer to this on page 66 of my report, the essential feature of malingering is the intentional production of false symptoms, like memory loss, motivated by external incentives, such as, this is from the DSM, evading criminal prosecution. And the DSM also notes that malingering should be strongly suspected, not just suspected. I think that's possibly the only place in the manual where they use the word strongly suspected, not consider it, think about it, take a look at it. No, strongly suspected if you have some of these factors. The individual is referred by an attorney. Criminal charges are pending. A marked discrepancy between the individual's claimed disability and objective findings and observations. Lack of cooperation in the evaluation, that didn't apply, and in presence of antisocial personality, that didn't apply. But his claimed disability is, he claimed that he doesn't have memory only for the criminal behavior. Only for his memory for everything else is excellent. Are you kidding? Day by day, in some cases hour by hour, as to what happened. So, I considered first whether this is dissociative amnesia. I just didn't jump to a conclusion, this is malingered amnesia. But I will say, malingered amnesia is very common in criminal cases. Dissociative amnesia means you forget something, and that can occur in a trauma. So I considered that.
Why didn't you diagnose that?
Because I don't think it's correct. I think that this is malingered amnesia for the reasons that I just said. You see, if you have good memory like he does, and the only thing you forget is criminal conduct, that's a red flag, because there's no memory disorder or neurocognitive disorder that is selective just for criminal conduct. So what does he not remember? Getting the gun, loading the gun, driving to where Lauren was, initially hiding the gun under his shirt, asking for a Goodwin to get Lauren. Lauren comes out. He said to her, "Are we going to resolve this or do we go to war?" And then he shot her twice. And then he has no memory for anything else until he said he wakes up at the hospital with a big light on him and people are touching his, his arm and his head injury. But there's something very odd about that. First of all, the only thing you don't remember is the criminal behavior. Why is that? Why isn't if it's a trauma, why isn't everything blocked out? Also, when you go to the hospital, now just think, you go to a hospital, you don't have any memory of anything, you wake up in the hospital with a big light on you and the staff are touching you, the first thing you say is, "Where the hell am I? Well, what's going on here? Why am I here?" He didn't say that. He didn't say that at all. And they asked him, "What happened?" He said, "I don't remember." But what about the supposed delusion that she was going to kill him? That he didn't, if he doesn't remember getting the gun and shooting her, did he forget that he thought she was going to kill him? Really? And so the memory is not just for the criminal back, it's also for the supposed delusion? Well, why didn't you say, I don't know, I don't remember anything, but I know some woman's trying to kill me. That didn't happen. That didn't happen at all.
Doctor, is there any difference between malingered amnesia and feigned amnesia?
It's basically the same.
Judge, may I have a moment?
Sure.
Doctor, was this shooting difficult for you to understand?
Shooting is not difficult to understand. It's a very easy to understand case.
Judge, I have no further questions at this time.
All right, cross-examination.
Doctor, you currently have another case with the Morris County Prosecutor's Office that you're consulting on, correct?
Correct.
Now, in this particular case, you indicated that you spent a total of 13.25 hours with regards to your contact with my client, correct?
Yes.
And how much of that 13 hours was done with testing?
Probably the first hour or two, maybe.
So you did about an hour or two of testing with regards to your evaluation, correct?
About that. I mean, you were there. I didn't time it, but you were there. Maybe you timed it.
Now, the rest of the time, you basically let Michael talk about this incident, correct?
Well, that's probably not a completely accurate description of what I did. I let him talk, but it was a response to my questions. So it wasn't just a free flow, tell me what you think. I had a lot of pointed questions.
Okay, now, the testing that you did, would you agree that you did the short version of a number of tests?
I did the abbreviated version of the Wechsler intelligence test, and I did the standard first 370 basic questions for the MMPI.
Now, how many questions did you give for the MMPI?
370.
And how many possible questions could you have given?
Well, could I have given? I would have to interpret this test very differently. That's about, I don't even know, maybe 500. I don't even know.
500.
Could be over 500. Yeah.
What, are you saying you don't know the exact?
I don't know the exact number because I don't give the complete version. I give the version that I give.
Well, now, in your discussions with Michael, you indicated in your report that the problems, the conflict with Lauren Cataract started in Florida in 2019, correct?
It was 2018, but I could be wrong.
Okay. If you refer to page 4 of your report, fifth line down, is in effect you indicated on around May of 2019, they returned to New Jersey, and then later on mentioned that the conflict between the parties seemed to have begun in Florida.
The conflict began in Florida, I believe it was 2018. If you look on page 3 in the bottom, she was training in North Carolina. Then Lauren attended the Florida horse facility in the winter of 2018, received training there 2 to 3 months. That's where conflicts began. And then April...
Conflicts began in 2018.
Yeah, that's what I said, in Florida.
So what conflict?
Oh, interpersonal conflicts. There was interpersonal conflicts with respect to who was going to do the training. Was it Michael? Was it Justin? The interpersonal conflicts.
And would you agree that in May of 2019, things started to get worse? The conflict grew more severe, correct?
Yes.
So, without question, this conflict, this stress, lasted well over 1 month, correct?
Definitely.
Now, did you discuss with Michael different things that he did to try to protect himself and everyone else at the facility?
Were you referring to something specific, counsel?
For instance, like him hiring Bug Sweep.
Yes, he hired Bug Sweep.
Hired a a private investigator to do a criminal background check on him.
Yes.
And he also hired an individual by the name of Larry David to sit at the top of the property in front of the stable to protect the people inside at night.
Correct.
Now, you said you reviewed all the social media posts.
Yes.
How many of them were there?
I don't know.
Estimate.
Thousands.
Tens of thousands?
I don't know. I got big binders. Maybe the prosecutor has an exact
How thick were
account.
your binders regarding social media posts?
Thick binders.
How many binders?
I don't know how many binders. I can't remember. Multiple binders.
When you say multiple, do you have any specific recollection of how many social media posts you looked through?
I don't have a specific recollection as to how many social media posts, except that I read all of them. Now, with respect to the number of binders, ask them. I have them at home, but I didn't count them. I just don't know the exact number.
Now, you'll agree with me that with regards to the test that you gave, there are people that question the validity of all of these tests.
When you say there are people, what do you mean by that?
Just a group of people that, if you want to attack a test, there are people out there for every single test that you gave where people question the validity and use of that test
Yes,
in making a determination.
yes. I would answer it more precisely. I would say that's how science progresses. People do tests, people do research, they question it, and then you move on.
And would you agree with me that this is a fluid science? Things change, the way tests are given changes?
The way tests are given are changes, but some conclusions with respect to lack of validity are definitive, and it's conclusive.
Now, you didn't put in your report everything that you reviewed.
I
Do you
put
normally not do that?
I never do that. I say I review the entire state's case. And I ask for the entire state's case.
How many videotaped statements did you review?
I reviewed all of them that I had.
How many did you
I
review?
don't remember what the exact number is, but let me think if I could, from my memory. Lauren's statement. The defendant didn't give a statement. Justin Hardin gave a statement. Ruth Cox gave a statement. Mary Haskins gave a statement. Dee Franco, I can't remember her name, gave a statement. Who else? I don't know. There may have been another one. I just can't recall it offhand. Those are the major players, although DeFranco not that much.
Now, your position is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Michael's believes that Lauren Canarak was going to kill him, Mary Haskins, and her children is a rational, realistic fear.
Oh, I didn't say it was rational and realistic, but it's not delusional. It was based on what was going on at the time. To be very, very specific, though, counsel, with respect to his belief of Lauren killing him, that had absolutely nothing to do with the shooting, because at the day of the shooting, he said nothing about that. He said, are we going to resolve this, or do we go to war, and then shot her? It was nothing like, you think you're going to kill me, I'll kill you first, or something, what you usually have in these sorts of confrontations. And it was triggered by the child investigator coming. That's what triggered the whole thing. It wasn't triggered the day before by the fire department coming. It was triggered by the investigator. Who wouldn't be upset if he incorrectly thought that Lauren called child protection. She didn't, but that's what he thought. But hold on, counsel.
Hold on. Just ask another question.
Okay.
Sometimes we get a little too far afield, doctor. We got to reel it in. Question, answer counsel's question. Don't deviate too much. Go ahead, ask another question.
You're saying Lauren Cataract did not call DCPP.
My understanding is that Safe Sport called DCCP. That's
Now,
my,
did you review all of Lauren Cataract's text messages?
yes.
Were you aware that she had Googled?
Judge, objection.
Ask another question, please.
Did you review the social media post where Lauren Cataract talked about going to war?
I don't have a specific recollection of that statement, but I reviewed the social media post, yes.
Do you have a specific recollection of reviewing posts where she accused them of criminal conduct online?
I know that there was Michael told me of an accusation that she accused him of insurance fraud and animal abuse, I think, and something else, so I'm aware of that.
Okay, but you don't have a recollection of reviewing those
All right,
documents, correct?
but his review of the document isn't really an issue, Mr. Belinkis. I've been saying that for a long time now. The issue is what's in the defendant's mind.
Right.
So his statements are what's pertinent. So you should characterize or ask
Understood.
questions aimed at that issue.
Understood. Did Michael tell you that he thought that Lauren Cataract was dangerous?
Yes.
Now, you indicated that other people on the farm felt the same way.
Yes.
Would you agree with me that no one felt that way to the extent that Michael Barisone did?
Well, I would disagree to the extent that Mary Haskins certainly felt that because she said our life is in danger, and then she thought additionally that Lauren's father would come kill her. So that's pretty strong.
And it's your belief that those beliefs of Mary Haskins were the exact same extent as what Michael Barisone felt?
I can't
Judge,
tell you.
I'm going to object. It's asking for state of mind of other people.
Yeah. Based on not an interview of her, but on listening to an interview. So, objection sustained.
And is it your belief that those threats that Michael Barisone believed had a real, rational basis for him to believe them?
What threats?
That she was going to kill him, Mary Haskins, and the children.
This is what he interpreted from the post. This interpretation was supported by Mary Haskins and Ruth Cox.
Now, did Michael tell you that the reason why he took the gun from Cox was he believed it was unsafe to be in the car because he was afraid Lauren or Robert Goodwin would break into the car and get access to that weapon?
Yes, he told me that.
And do you believe that he was feigning when he told you that?
No, I don't believe he was feigning. I think no. The answer is no.
Now, with regards to your opinion that Michael is feigning amnesia as to not remembering the event, would you agree with me that during the incident, he was beaten about the head?
No, that was post-incident. That was after the shooting. He shot Lauren twice, shot at Goodwin. Goodwin tackled him, punched him in the head, put him in a chokehold, and whatever else he did. That was afterwards.
Okay,
And that's according to your review of the discovery.
Correct.
Just so we're clear on the record.
Yeah, yes, correct.
that comes from the statements of Goodwin and Cataract, correct?
Yeah, that was after the shooting. Yeah, he didn't hit him in the head before the shooting.
Irrespective of when he received that beating, would you agree that an extensive beating to someone's head could cause amnesia?
Possible, but not selective amnesia.
Now, would you agree with me that within moments after the incident, when the police and the first aid people respond, that Michael Barisone had indicated virtually to every single person that questioned him.
But Mr. Belinkis, just if there's a specific, I don't like when you make a broad statement like that. All right, just ask if your recollection tied to the evidence in the case. All right, go ahead. Rephrase your question, please.
Are you aware that with regards to the documents that were provided to you, that immediately after the incident, that every single person that Michael...
Oh, wait a second. Am I talking to myself? You don't characterize it every single person.
Okay.
I said tie it to a specific witness. You can go through each of the witnesses. I don't mind if you're doing that, but you can't just say everybody because I'm not sure that was the testimony.
Doctor, are you aware that with regards to the first aid people, that Michael Barisone, when asked about the event, said he could not recall anything concerning the event?
My recollection is with the EMT person, he made a statement that a person was going to come to the farm and take my kids away. That's my recollection.
And in addition to that, that he had no recollection of the specific event after that?
That's what he said to the EMT people. After the shooting and before the police came, or as the police came, he made fatalistic statements. I have it in my report, but I can't recall. Something like, my life is over, I had a good life, they took it all away. Fatalistic statements. Those statements indicate that he remembered what happened. Because he didn't say what happened. He didn't say arrest Goodwin. He just attacked me.
Did any document that you read indicate that when they first arrived, he was partially conscious?
Yes.
Did any document indicate to you that he was incoherent?
Some did, some did not. Hold on, counsel.
Counsel, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Just answer his question, please. All right?
Isn't it the fact that with respect to all the medical records, they indicated that he was confused and he had an altered mental state?
Some medical records said that, and the police record said something different.
And didn't one police report indicate that at one point he says, "Is this real? I need to wake up"?
I believe he said that in the ambulance.
You're sure about that?
That's my recollection. I questioned him about that, and it's in my report with respect to that.
Okay. Now, you're aware that Michael Barisone had seen Ann Picardo over a 20-year period, correct?
Correct.
Did you ever talk to her?
No.
I have nothing further.
All right. Any...
No, Your Honor.
All right, you may step down. Thank you.
Judge.
All right, any further witnesses on rebuttal?
No, Judge.
All right, so the state rests on rebuttal. Do you have one more witness in sir rebuttal?
Should I have one?
Let me see at sidebar. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask for your indulgence. Mr. Belinkis has what he says, and the prosecutor agrees will be a short sir rebuttal witness as we refer to it. We're going to try to get it done today because that is going to be the last witness. We'll complete our testimony today. Counsel and I have some legal matters to go over tomorrow, so you're going to have the day off from this trial tomorrow. You're going to come back Monday for summations and charge, and then deliberations will follow thereafter. All right, so we're going to have one quick witness tonight, and we're going to get it done as quick as possible. It shouldn't be too long. Go ahead, Mr. Belinkis.
Defense calls Dr. Hassonm back to the stand.
All right, left hand on the Bible again, doctor, please.
Do you swear in the presence of Almighty God that the testimony given to this court regarding this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Charles Hassonm, Hassson.
Thank you.
All right, you may have a seat, doctor. Go ahead, Mr. Belinkis.
Dr. Hassonm, I'm going to try to ask you some very specific questions. And if you could answer as succinct and direct as possible, to save some time. You heard Dr. Schlesinger testify with regards to you scoring his test of the MMPI, correct?
Yes.
And why did you use his scores?
It was an existing test. I wanted to compare his scores to my scores and to see if there was any kind of discrepancy.
Okay, and was there any discrepancy?
Well, first of all,
Answer yes or no, please.
no discrepancy.
Okay, and what did you find with regards to your scoring using his data,
On which test?
the MMPI I'm
Okay.
referring to?
Found a very elevated score on the scale, remarkably elevated, scale 90. Scale 6 with a T-score of 90, which suggests delusional disorder. Secondly, I also found an elevation on a scale that indicates persecutory ideas. Then I also scored other scales on there that all point in the direction of a delusion.
Okay, did you hear his testimony basically saying that that score of 90 means nothing?
Not
Well,
what he said, Judge.
Yeah, it's
Well,
not exactly what he
That
said.
that he didn't agree with your interpretation of that 90 score. Did you hear his testimony?
yes, I heard that.
And what's your response to that?
I think that he should be more familiar with the literature on that test. It's now 500 questions, 567. And as I indicated earlier today, the particular person who I referenced, James Butcher, he said that you should look up the references in order to understand that. And I indicated the things from David Nichols. But basically, I can totally defend any position that a score of so elevated score on scale 6 is indicative of a delusional disorder.
Right, now, with regards to his testimony concerning the Rorschach, you heard that, correct?
May I just add something? This is very important. In the book that was shown to me yesterday by Butcher, Butcher said, under no circumstances should you play around with hand scoring the test because it's too vulnerable to make errors. That was the reason I ran through the test a second time rather than use his scores. I compared it.
Okay, let's move to the Rorschach.
Okay.
Okay, with regards to the Rorschach, what, if any, problems did you identify with regards to his administration of that test?
Well, I don't, first of all, he used a non-standard approach, which is remarkable to me. He did not indicate where the percepts were located. You have to open up the book to find out where it's located. He eyeballed the data. In my opinion, that is a violation of being able to analyze tests in terms of being reliable and valid.
Okay, now with regards to the TAT,
Basically, the TAT, he eyeballed the data. That test does not have any error scores in there. There's no validity, reliability, and the elephant in the room that I saw was the fact that on 2 of the cards there were weapons in there. One was a rifle and one was a handgun, it looked like. And Mr. Barisone did not discuss that.
and what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, if you accept the projective hypothesis that apparently Dr. Schlesinger buys into, you'd ask yourself, why did the person ignore that? Is it part of a dissociation where you look at the environment and you see a stimulus? You don't see a stimulus because it's so stressful to you.
Okay,
Also, I'll try to keep it simple, stupid. Also, there was very few responses on that test. There was just 14 responses. Also, just to have everyone know, on the RPAS by Meyer and the CS, trust me, those international norms are not considered valid. I mean, there's questions about it. There's a very low sample size on the international laws, and also on the extra. There are about 600 plus people on that. The people they studied on the international.
I'm going to cut you off.
Okay.
As far as the HTP test that he talked about, what's your opinion as to how he did that?
A joke. It's eyeballing data. Anyone could come up with an opinion on that. There's no validity there.
Okay, doctor, he says he performed tests for about an hour to 2 hours. How long did you test Michael Barisone? How many hours?
I'd say maybe 7 hours. And it also, to score the Rorschach, you're talking about two and a half hours. That's a highly difficult test to score. All the data on the RPAS group comes from Exner. The Exner system was incorporated into the RPAS system. I don't know if he is aware of that.
Okay, now, finally, with regards to his comments concerning you administering the PAI test, and him reading those things with the, warning sign on the top of the page, what does that mean, and how did you interpret that test?
Simply, I don't think he knows the literature on terms of validity testing. He does not know the literature from Richard Rogers. I use Richard Rogers' cut scores. Richard Rogers and his group took into account standard error of the measurement. If you give a test, for example, okay, let's go on, if you want me to stop.
The Bender-Gestalt test.
Bender-Gestalt test is a joke in this kind of a case. Bender-Gestalt test has false negatives. That means I could be brain damaged and do perfectly well on that test. That's not an adequate test for organicity.
How about the WASI test?
Well, that's a joke too, I'm sorry to say. The WASI test and the Wechsler test, you know what they have in common? The name, Wechsler. It is known that the WASI test will typically elevate scores. That's why his scores are higher than my scores. That's one of the factors, but that's known. You should never give the WASI test if you're looking to give a complete, honest evaluation.
Nothing further, Judge.
What, cross-examination?
None, Judge.
All right, you may step down, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. You've heard all the testimony in this case. You don't have any other rebuttal witnesses, do you, Mr. Balinkas?
No, Judge.
No, all right. You've heard all the testimony in this case. The next step will be summations of counsel and the charge by the court. We're not going to do that tomorrow for a number of reasons. Number one, counsel and I have to review the charge to make sure it's appropriate. And there are some legal issues that we have to go over with regard to the charge. And the second reason is I don't want to give you this case on a Friday afternoon late. It's been 2 weeks of testimony. We're on schedule. Actually, I think we're doing better than originally thought by counsel. So I'd rather have summations Monday when everyone's fresh. I'll give you the charge. You can have the case Monday and then Tuesday and however long you need next week. So we're going to break for today. I'll meet with counsel tomorrow to go over the charge. We'll get that finalized and we'll return Monday morning fresh, 9 o'clock, as always, for summations and the charge. All right, it's important now. You've heard all the testimony, so please don't discuss the case with anyone, and you'll have the case for deliberation very shortly. Thank you all. We'll see you Monday morning, same time. Off the record.